My son-in-law Marcus looked across the table at me like I was something he'd scraped off the bottom of his shoe. It was the 4th of July. My daughter, Caitlin, had spent 2 days decorating the backyard. Red, white, and blue streamers. A new propane grill I'd quietly paid for last month. The whole neighborhood could smell the ribs I'd been marinating since the night before. 14 people sitting around folding tables pushed together, paper plates, potato salad, the whole American summer picture. Marcus was holding court at the far end, talking about his new project manager title like he'd just been named Secretary of Defense. He'd had 3 beers before the food was even ready. I was standing at the grill, tongs in hand, minding my business. That's when he said it. "Hey, Tom." He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "You ever think about the fact that you've spent 30 years crawling under people's houses, touching their wires?" He laughed. A couple people smiled nervously. "I mean, does it ever bother you, being an electrician at your age?" The table went quiet. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "Does it bother me?" I set down the tongs. "About as much as it'll bother you when you find out who's been paying your rent." He stopped laughing. I turned back to the grill. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand why those 11 words landed the way they did, you have to go back about 2.5 years, back to when Marcus first walked into my daughter's life, and I made a decision I thought was right. A decision I kept secret for longer than I should have. I'm Tom Briggs. I'm 59 years old. I've been a licensed master electrician in the state of Ohio for 31 years. My wife, Donna, passed away from breast cancer 6 years ago. Caitlin is our only child. She was 26 when Donna died, already out of the house, already working as a dental hygienist downtown. I raised her to be independent, and she was, but losing her mother hit her in ways neither of us fully understood right away. That's when Marcus showed up. She met him at a work conference. He was in sales, software sales specifically, and he had the kind of confidence that comes naturally to men who've never really failed at anything yet. Good-looking in a way that photographs well, talked fast, smiled easy. Caitlin brought him to Sunday dinner about 3 months in, and I watched him across the table the way I watch a new circuit panel, looking for what's overloaded, what's been improperly wired, what might cause a fire later. He was charming. I'll give him that, but he talked about himself the way some people recite scripture, with total conviction and no self-awareness. "I'm on track to make regional director by 35, he told me that first Sunday, cutting his chicken like he was already at a boardroom dinner. The trajectory in SaaS sales right now is unreal. 6 figures by the end of next year, no question." "That's good," I said. "Caitlin works hard. She deserves someone who can pull his weight." He smiled at that. Didn't hear the warning in it. They got engaged 14 months later. Caitlin called me from the parking lot of the restaurant where he proposed, crying the good kind of tears. I told her I was happy for her, and I was. I genuinely was. I just made a mental note to keep watching. The warning signs came gradually, the way they usually do. First, it was the move. Marcus had been renting a 1-bedroom in Columbus, but when they got engaged, they decided to get a place together. A 2-bedroom apartment in a nicer part of town, closer to her clinic. The rent was $1,850 a month. Between her hygienist's salary and his sales income, it should have been manageable. But 2 months after they moved in, Caitlin called me on a Wednesday night, her voice careful and controlled in the way that meant she was trying not to worry me. "Dad, I hate to ask this. What do you need?" A pause. Marcus's commission got delayed. Something about end-of-quarter accounting. "We're short on rent this month, just by a few hundred." I sent her $600 that night. Told her not to think twice about it. The commission delay became a pattern. 1 quarter it was a restructuring at his company. The next quarter it was a client who backed out at the last minute. There was always a reason, always a temporary explanation, and Caitlin, who trusted people the same way her mother had, believed every one of them. I started covering the gap quietly. Not all of it. Not at first. 200 here, 300 there, slipped in as just because money. Birthday money, here's a little extra for groceries money. The kind of help a father gives a daughter without making a production of it. But by the end of the first year, I was regularly sending $800 to $1,000 a month. I kept a note on my phone, running total. By the time that 4th of July rolled around, the number was $400. I want to be honest about something because I've thought about this a lot since. I kept it secret partly to protect Caitlin. She would have been embarrassed. She would have pushed back, told me to stop. Maybe caused friction in her marriage, trying to force Marcus to fix it. I didn't want to be the reason my daughter's new marriage had cracks in it. Donna would have done the same thing. We were quiet fixers, Donna and I. We handled things in the background so the people we loved didn't have to. But I also kept it secret because I wanted to know who Marcus really was, not the version he performed at Sunday dinners, the real one. And slowly, I was finding out. It started with small things. He never offered to help clean up after family meals. Not once in 2.5 years. Caitlin would be stacking plates, and Marcus would be on his phone or refilling his drink or finding someone to talk to about himself. I watched my daughter move in and out of the kitchen while her husband sat comfortable and unaware, and I kept my mouth shut because it wasn't my house and it wasn't my marriage. Then there was the way he talked about trades. It came up a few times over family dinners, usually when the topic drifted toward work or money. Once, when my neighbor Dave, a plumber with his own business, came up in conversation, Marcus had laughed and said, "No offense, but I don't know how guys like that do it. Same thing, everyday dirty work, no upward mobility. I'd lose my mind." I let it go. Another time, Caitlin mentioned that I'd rewired a kitchen for a client that week. A big job, 3 days of work. Marcus glanced up from his phone and said, "What do you charge for something like that, Tom? Like $2,000? The way he said it, $2,000 sounded like he was describing a garage sale price. "More than that," I said. He made a face that said he didn't believe me. Here's what Marcus didn't know about electricians. He didn't know that a master electrician in Ohio with 30 years of experience in his own client list can clear $140,000 a year in a good year. He didn't know that I'd paid off my house in 2019. He didn't know that Donna's life insurance and my own savings meant I was sitting on a retirement that would make his software sales career look modest by comparison. He saw a guy in work boots with grease on his hands, and he filed me under a category in his head, and he never looked closer. That's his problem with people. He puts them in categories and stops paying attention. The week before the 4th of July, I found out something that changed the whole picture. Caitlin called me on a Tuesday, and her voice had a new texture to it. Not the careful, controlled worry of the rent calls. Something harder. Something she was holding with both hands. "Dad, I need to tell you something." A breath. "I'm pregnant." I sat down in my kitchen chair. "Caitlin, I know. We weren't exactly planning. Are you happy?" A long pause. Then, quietly, "I think so." "Yes, I am." Another pause. Marcus is excited. He's been talking about it all week. He says it's the push he needed to finally go after the regional director position. Something about the way she said that, the push he needed, sat in my chest like a stone. My daughter was growing a child inside her body, and her husband was treating it like career motivation. "That's wonderful news," I said, and I meant the first part. That night I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I looked at the note on my phone. $23,400. $23,400. I thought about a baby coming into an apartment where the rent was partially my money. I thought about what it would look like in a year, in 2 years, if nothing changed. I thought about Donna, what she would say. I knew exactly what she would say. She would say, "Tom, you can't keep doing this without saying something. You're not helping. You're enabling." And she would have been right. I made a decision. I wasn't going to cut off the money. Not yet. Not with a baby coming. But I was going to stop pretending everything was fine. And if Marcus gave me a reason, a real, undeniable, public reason, I was going to let the truth out. He gave me that reason on the 4th of July, after he made his comment at the grill, the crawling under houses, the being an electrician at your age. I didn't make a scene. I flipped the ribs. I served the food. I laughed at my brother-in-law Gary's terrible jokes. I watched Marcus drink 2 more beers and tell the story of a sales call he'd crushed that week to anyone who would listen. But I noticed that after my comment, the one about who was paying his rent, he got quiet, quieter than I'd ever seen him at a family event. He kept glancing at me from across the yard. Once, when our eyes met, he looked away first. After everyone left and Caitlin was inside wrapping up leftovers, Marcus found me by the side gate where I was folding up the extra chairs. "Hey!" His voice was different. The performance was gone. "What did you mean earlier? What you said about the rent?" I looked at him. "What do you think I meant?" He worked his jaw. "Caitlin doesn't know you've been." "No," I said. "She doesn't." He ran a hand through his hair. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked his age, which was 32, which meant he still had a lot of growing up to do. "Tom, I was going to pay you back. Every bit of it. I've got a deal closing in September that's going to Marcus." I said his name the way I used to say Caitlin's name when she was 16 and trying to explain something that didn't add up. Calm. Final. "I don't want to talk about repayment right now. I want to ask you something." He waited. "That comment you made at the grill. In front of my family, my neighbors, my daughter." I kept my voice level. "What were you hoping to accomplish with that?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was just messing around." "You've been messing around for 2.5 years, I said. Every dinner. Every holiday. Little comments about my work, about tradespeople, about guys who get their hands dirty. And I've let it go every time because I didn't want to cause problems for Caitlin." I set down the folding chair I was holding. "But she's pregnant now, and that changes the math." He looked up at that. "What does that mean?" "It means I need to know what kind of man my grandchild is going to have for a father. And what I've seen so far concerns me." He opened his mouth. "I'm not finished." I picked the chair back up and leaned it against the fence. "You are smart, Marcus. I genuinely believe that. But you've got a blind spot the size of this backyard. You look at a man in work boots and you see the bottom rung. You have no idea what you're looking at." I pulled out my phone. I opened the note. I turned it so he could see the number. He stared at it for a long time. "That's what I've put in over the last 2 years, I said. "Not as a loan. Not with any conditions. As a father helping his daughter have a stable life while her husband found his footing. I'm not telling you this to humiliate you. I'm telling you because you humiliated me today in front of people who know my name. And I think you needed a clear picture of what the situation actually looks like." He said nothing. His face had gone through about 7 different expressions and landed on something that might have been real. "What happens now?" he finally said. "Are you going to tell Caitlin?" "That's not my decision to make alone." I went inside. Caitlin was at the kitchen sink, back to me, washing the big serving bowl. I stood in the doorway for a moment. "Can we sit down?" I said. She turned, read my face, dried her hands. "Dad, what happened?" It wasn't a question. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten 100 Sunday dinners over the past 2 years, watching Marcus talk about himself while my daughter refilled everyone's water glasses. I told her everything. From the first $600 to the running total to the comment at the grill to the conversation by the gate. I didn't editorialize. I didn't call Marcus names. I laid it out the way I'd wire a panel, clean, labeled, no loose ends. She listened without interrupting, which was how I knew it was serious. Caitlin always interrupted. It was one of my favorite things about her, the way she thought out loud. But she sat still and listened until I was done. Then she was quiet for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" she said, not angry, not yet. Something more like grief. "Because I didn't want to be the reason your marriage had problems." "Dad." She closed her eyes. "The problems were already there. You were just covering them up." That landed. Because she was right. And I told her so. "I know," I said. "That was my mistake. I was trying to protect you the same way I always have, and what I should have done was let you see the full picture sooner. I'm sorry for that." She looked at the table. Her hands were flat on the surface, and I noticed they were steady, which meant she was holding herself very carefully. "How much does he know that you know?" I told him the total. "Tonight, by the gate." She nodded slowly. "And his response?" "He said he was going to pay it back. September deal." She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "He's been saying that September deal for a year." The back door opened and Marcus came in. He stopped when he saw us sitting together, saw the look on Caitlin's face, understood what had happened. He pulled out the 3rd chair and sat down without being asked, and I gave him credit for that at least. He didn't run. "How long have you known he was helping us?" Caitlin asked him. "I knew about some of it," Marcus said. He wasn't performing now. His voice was flat and tired. "Not all of it." "Did you ask him to stop?" A pause. "No." "Did you increase your own contributions when you knew he was covering the gap?" Another pause. Longer. "No." Caitlin looked at her husband for a long time. There are moments in a family where something shifts permanently, where the furniture of a relationship gets rearranged, and you know it's never going back. I could see that happening on my daughter's face. She wasn't ending anything, not that night, but she was seeing something she couldn't unsee, and she was deciding what to do with it. "I need you to understand something," she said to Marcus. Her voice was very quiet. "My father built a 30-year business with his hands. He put me through college. He took care of my mother for 2 years when she was sick without ever once complaining about it, and you sat at his table and made him feel small." She paused. "I need to know that will never happen again." Marcus looked at the table. "It won't. That's not enough," she said. "I need to know why it happened in the first place." There was a long silence. Outside, I could hear the neighbors' kids setting off the last of their bottle rockets. Little pops in the dark. The kind of sound that means summer, means freedom, means something ending and something else beginning. Marcus looked up, not at me, at Caitlin. "I think," he said slowly, like he was finding the words in real time. "I grew up being told that certain kinds of work were less than, that if you worked with your hands, it meant you hadn't made it. And I just..." He stopped, shook his head. I never questioned it. I just carried it around like it was true. It was the most honest thing I'd ever heard him say. That's a place to start, I said. He looked at me. For the first time in 2.5 years, he looked at me without the performance, without the positioning, without trying to establish something. He just looked at me like a man who had made a serious mistake and knew it. I owe you an apology, he said. A real one, not just for today. You do, I said. But I'm not going to make you give it to me tonight. Tonight's been enough. I stayed for another hour. We drank coffee. Nobody talked about the money or the comment or the baby. Not directly. We talked about other things, easier things, the way families do when they're feeling their way back toward each other. Before I left, I hugged Caitlin at the door. She held on a beat longer than usual. I'm going to need you to be honest with me from now on, she said into my shoulder, even when it's hard. I will be, I said. That's a promise. Driving home through the summer dark, windows down, the smell of backyard fires and cut grass coming through, I thought about what had changed that day and what hadn't. The money was still spent. The comments were still said. 2 years of gritting my teeth at holiday tables were still 2 years. But something had moved. Something that had been sitting in the wrong place had been shifted back toward where it belonged. 3 months later, Marcus got a job offer from a different company, better base salary, less dependence on commission. He took it. I don't know if the conversation that night had anything to do with it. I'd like to think it did. Caitlin called me when the offer came through. She sounded lighter than she had in a long time. He asked me to tell you, she said. He said he wanted you to know. Tell him I'm glad, I said. And I was. The baby is due in December. A boy. They're naming him after Donna's father, which is the name I always hoped they'd choose, though I never said so. Some things you hold quietly and wait for. I've still got the note on my phone. $23,400. I'm never going to bring it up again. That's not what it was for. It was for my daughter, and for the life she was building, and because that's what you do when you love someone. You hold things up quietly in the background so they don't fall. The difference is, now the whole table knows who's been doing the holding, and the stupid plumber is doing just fine. I've been an electrician for 31 years. I've crawled through attics in August heat and worked in crawl spaces in January cold. I've missed dinners and early bedtimes and Saturday mornings because someone's power was out and they needed help. I built a life with those hours, quietly and without much fanfare, the way most working people do. And for 2.5 years, I watched a man sit at my table and look right through all of it. What I've learned, not from a book, not from anyone telling me, but from living long enough to see patterns repeat, is that the way a person treats someone they believe is beneath them tells you everything about their character. Not how they act at job interviews, not how they talk to their boss, how they treat the person they've already decided doesn't matter. That's the real measure. Marcus wasn't a bad person. I want to be clear about that. He was a person who had never been asked to look honestly at the assumptions he carried. Nobody had ever held a mirror up and said, "Look at what you actually believe about other people. Look at what those beliefs cost the people around you." He moved through life on the fuel of his own confidence. And confidence without self-awareness is just a faster way to cause damage. What changed things wasn't the argument. It wasn't me showing him the number on my phone, as necessary as that was. What changed things was that for one moment, in the backyard, with the bottle rockets going off and the summer dark coming in, he stopped performing and started listening. That's rarer than people think. Most people, when they're caught, double down. They explain. They justify. They find a way to make themselves the reasonable one. Marcus sat down and listened, and then he said something true. That's where character gets built. Not in the easy moments, in the moment when you could run and you don't. I think about what I would have done differently. I would have been honest sooner. I told myself I was protecting Caitlin, and I was. But I was also protecting a situation that needed to be disrupted. Quiet help, given indefinitely without honesty, isn't kindness. It's just a slower way of letting a problem grow. The hardest thing for people who love others is learning that you cannot smooth every rough surface for the people you care about. Sometimes the rough surface is the lesson. Sometimes your job is to step back and let reality do what only reality can do. Caitlin is going to be a mother in December. Her son is going to grow up watching how his parents treat each other, how they treat the people around them, how they respond when they're wrong. Children learn almost nothing from what you tell them, and almost everything from what they watch you do. That's the weight that sits on every parent's chest if they're paying attention. I'm not asking Marcus to become a different person. I'm asking him to become more honest about the person he already is, and then to decide, deliberately, who he wants to be instead. That's the only real project any of us have. Everything else, the job titles, the commission checks, the stories we tell at holiday tables, that's all just noise around the edges of that one central question. The stupid electrician is doing just fine, and now, for the first time, the whole table knows it.